Hi folks, glad to have you back with us. It's Tuesday of the week before Easter, and over the course of this week we have invited you to read together with us and pray together with us, even though we can't be together. And today we've asked you to read the 118th Psalm and a fairly short passage from the 21st chapter of the Gospel according to Matthew, beginning verse 15 and going through verse 40. These readings are keyed, more or less, to the events of that last week. And this is not an exact science. The Gospels don't come with timestamps for the most part. And so it's sometimes difficult to tell what is arranged chronologically and what is arranged thematically. And sometimes things can be both. But it does seem pretty clear from all four Gospels that a significant chunk of those immediate days between Palm Sunday, the triumphal entry into Jerusalem, and Jesus' arrest on Thursday evening, that a significant chunk of that was used in public teaching and preaching. Teaching, exhortation, warning. Our reading here from Matthew 21 is only a small piece of that. And it consists in three separate little stories here that are, each of them is prompted by a question that's posed to Jesus. Now, Jesus was teaching in the public courts of the temple, probably in Solomon's porch, which was a roofed but open air area that was usually used for this sort of thing. And while he was there, he was attracting attention. Not all of it completely positive. In this case, he was attracting the attention of the two major parties that existed in Jerusalem within the Jewish community in the first half of the first century. Those are all qualifications that are necessary. Some of you know why. In any case, here it's the Sadducees and the Pharisees. The Pharisees and the Sadducees, however you want to arrange them. And the Pharisees and the Sadducees came to Jesus and they asked him these gotcha questions, trying to catch him out. Maybe catch him out, but hey, next best thing, use him to score points against one another. They're rivals. They're rivals. And first to ask a question here is the Pharisees, right? You caught it. It's in verse 17. This is the gotcha question. Tell us, is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Now, the reason this is a gotcha question is because people in first century Judea didn't like to pay taxes. They felt about taxes about the way a lot of people feel about taxes now. Only with the added layer that they weren't paying taxes to their own government, they were paying taxes to the hated occupier, to the Romans. So if Jesus says, yeah, pay all your taxes, no big deal, they're hoping that the common people will hear that and no, they don't agree. They'll boo him or something. However, if Jesus says, absolutely, you should pay your tax, or you should not pay your taxes, then suddenly he can be arrested by the Romans. But what does Jesus do? You know the story. You just read it. He asked for a denarius, silver coin, 1 day's wage for a laborer. And he asked, whose likeness and inscription is this? The answer, of course, is Caesar's. Then he said to them, verse 21, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. Now, usually that's a very wise answer. That's how you hear it, right? But that's really a zinger right back at the Pharisees, because he's saying, you're standing here asking gotcha questions about whether a person should pay their taxes, what they owe to the Roman government. Meanwhile, you are neglecting your obligations toward the Almighty. You're fussing over whether you should pay honor and respect to a man in Rome when you are neglecting to honor and serve and love and listen to the ruler of the universe. The next gotcha question here is asked by Sadducees, and it's explained here that the Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, which is accurate. And they pose this weird scenario to Jesus. It's based on the idea that the law of Moses provided that if a man was married and he died before he had a son, then his brother was obligated to marry his widow, and any property inherited by that first son of the new marriage would be considered the inheritance of the original brother. It's levirate marriage. There's some reasons for it. I don't have time for that right now. The point is, they're asking this gotcha question. Well, wait a minute. What if the first guy dies? His widow marries his brother. There's 7 more of them. They all die. She dies. At the resurrection, whose wife is she? Huh? Tell us that, Mr. Smarty Pants. Jesus doesn't indulge this weird little game. He answered them, verse 29, "You are wrong because you know neither the scriptures nor the power of God. For at the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven." In other words, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't begin to have a clue. Now, he did mention the resurrection, and that encouraged the Pharisees, who had already left, to come back and ask one more. And one of the Pharisees, a lawyer, asks Jesus a question here. It's explicitly stated in verse 35 that this was to test him. Right? He says, "Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law?" Now, this is one of these questions that old men with beards would sit around and arguing at great length and on and on and on. But Jesus gives a very quick answer here. He says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments depend all the law and the prophets." Now, as I said with the first one, this is not just an opportunity for Jesus to look smart. He's actually answering the guy who's putting him to the test. Rather than, this man has in front of him the Son of God. This lawyer who's putting him to the test has in front of him the one through whom, Colossians 1 verse 15, 16, through whom the entire universe holds together. He has the one who is the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega, the bright and morning star. And what does he do? Does he fall down in adoration? Does he worship at Jesus' feet? Does he glorify him before the crowd? Does he acknowledge him as his King and his Savior? Nope. Why? Because he does not, this is what Jesus is implying here, this lawyer does not love God with all of his heart, his soul, his mind. And by extension, he probably doesn't love his neighbor as himself, and that's the entirety of the law. When he's failed to do those things, what good is it to keep kosher or to avoid carrying loads on the Sabbath or things like that? Now, I said to you that there's a theme here, and I think you might have caught it. And the theme is this. In each of these cases, these questions are being asked of Jesus by people who have massively underappreciated, underestimated, undervalued God. They have massively undervalued God the Son standing before them. And they treat him as some country bumpkin to be buffaloed into an answer. Now, we also read the 118th Psalm, and did you read verse 22? Because this is cited in Matthew chapter 21, one chapter earlier here. It says, "The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. This is the Lord's doing. It is marvelous in our eyes." Who's the stone? It's Jesus. Absolutely, it's Jesus. Now, here is my encouragement to you, our encouragement to you for prayer today. Today, let's make a point of praying and asking the Lord to give us eyes to see, ears to hear, minds to comprehend, and hearts to rejoice in the infinite goodness and grace and beauty and holiness and awesomeness and glory and power of Jesus Christ. We don't want to be like these Pharisees and these Sadducees. We don't want to read our Bibles looking for loopholes and trying to see if we can find exceptions for our cases. We just want to bask in the infinite glory of God in Jesus Christ, his Son. Pray for that gift. Don't undervalue him. And by the way, you will undervalue him, so pray for forgiveness for it and pray that you're able to value him better, to love him more. Thanks. We will see you tomorrow.